Okay, great. Mr. Patterson, when you're ready.
Yes. Your Honor, if it pleases the court. Your Honor, this is a case that happened on June 20th of 2023 at 765 McDaniel Street. And on that particular day, Mr. Bilal, who's 18 years old as of today, him and his friend by the name of Mr. Brown was sitting in the apartment complex, and they were just sitting on the steps. Fortunately, Your Honor, I've had the occasion to view the entire video of this shooting. And what the evidence will show, Your Honor, is that my client was sitting with his back to a rail. And you can see the metal bars, the little thin bars where you can see his back. But there's also a concrete barrier right next to those metal bars. And the evidence will show that the deceased in this case, Mr. Favors, walked up from behind up the sidewalk. It's important to note, Your Honor, that my client would not be able to see Mr. Favors coming up because of the concrete barrier, and his back was to the rail. But Mr. Favors would clearly be able to see the back of my client as he walked up. And what happened, Your Honor, the video shows us about maybe 20, 30 seconds at the most of the shooting. And it shows Mr. Favors just randomly walking up the sidewalk. And as you walk up the sidewalk, you've got to make a curve in order for my client to see Mr. Favors. He would not be able to see Mr. Favors until he literally walked up on the steps because the concrete barrier blocked everything. But Mr. Favors would clearly be able to see the back of my client because of the bars that you can see through. And as Mr. Favors walks around the barrier, within a split second behind this barrier, you could not see the actual shooting because the concrete barrier was so wide. But the moment Mr. Favors cut that corner, you see his body lean in, and all of a sudden, shooting just began at that point. You see my client then starts ducking, and then he obviously shoots Mr. Favors, and you'll see the video. He runs off the porch, he falls, he gets back up and run and come back because he dropped his phone. So he came back to get his phone. But the evidence will show that Mr. Favors literally ambushed my client, and my client obviously had to defend himself. But during this shooting, Mr. Favors also killed Mr. Brown, who was sitting on the porch with my client. So Mr. Favors actually killed Mr. Brown, and then my client returned fire, killing Mr. Favors. And Your Honor, at that point, the video basically ends after a gentleman comes back. Also at the very end, there's a gentleman that comes back and leans over the deceased, Mr. Favors. And we believe, Your Honor, that he took the weapon off of Mr. Favors and then left the scene. The state will argue, because at the previous hearing, they would argue that he simply came back and looked over the body and left. Your Honor, so we're certainly going to believe that this case would be, fortunately, there is video, and that's what makes this case a case of self-defense. But Your Honor, we believe that we just have a few witnesses. Can I start calling those witnesses, Your Honor?
Sure. These are witnesses who are going to talk about what?
Character only.
Okay.
That is correct. And Your Honor, this time we call his mother, Tashawn Bilal. I keep, Your Honor, I get it confused between Bilal and Bilal.
Not a problem. So why don't you pause right there? Because I'm happy to work this in one of two formats. If these witnesses, Mr. Patterson, are going to be speaking to Mr. Bilal's character, I'm fine for them talking right there and not being sworn, but I don't want to deprive the state of the opportunity to cross-examine them under oath if that's how they want to move forward. So as long as it's limited to character and not facts and circumstances of the situation, Mr. Bate, are you fine that we do the normal, ma'am, tell me what you want to tell me about, in this case, your son?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right.
Yes.
So, ma'am, tell me what you want to tell me about your son.
You want to raise your right hand first?
Well, you don't even need to be sworn in. Okay. You're not being examined. So we're here to talk about whether your son should be on bond, with his lawyer having admitted that he has shot and killed someone as an 18-year-old. So you need to tell me why I should think that it's safe under the circumstances for your son to be in circulation.
And Your Honor, may I at least qualify who she is?
Oh, sure, you can ask any questions you want. It just doesn't need to be under oath. You
Absolutely.
Can frame it how you want to frame it.
And tell the court your full name.
Tashawn Bilal.
And what's your relationship to Sean?
I'm his mom.
Okay. And tell the court what you know about his character as he was growing up, up until this day?
Sean is a resilient child. He has always been a smart young man. He's very intelligent, he's family oriented and loving young man. My son has never been suspended nor has been in any trouble. He graduated with honors with a 3.6 GPA and has been an honor student since kindergarten. He received over 6 offers, college offers for academics. Sean has received a full ride to the college of his choice, of which he was the only student from his high school to receive the 5 strong scholarships. So the Albany State University, in addition to the Hope Scholarship, Achiever Now, and Carver Early College Alumni, and also the 100 Black Men Scholarship. Sean has potential of being a well-rounded young man. I'm not just saying this because he's my son, but everyone that comes in contact with him says the same thing. Sean also is involved with a lot of community programs such as the Stewart Center, 100 Black Men Organization, and other curriculum activities such as football. He also was in a news article for One Goal, of which he was chosen to speak about how it is to grow up in the Pittsburgh community and still maintain his grades and stay focused. Your Honor, I ask that you see that Sean's character speaks for itself and grant him a bond today.
Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate you being here. So you may have said at the beginning we were shifting and you were getting that document. Your son went to what high school?
Carver Early College.
Got it. And which of the different offers did he accept to go to college?
He is accepted Albany State University.
Albany State?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Your Honor, at this time we call Zonia Denham.
Excuse me. Can I give you spell her first name?
And spell your first name for the court report.
T-I-S-H-A-W-N.
Thank you.
Good morning, ma'am, and I'll need you to definitely spell your first name.
It's Z with a like zebra, O-N-Y-A, like Tanya and Son.
Okay, and last name?
Denham, D as in David, E-N-H-A-M.
Thank you, ma'am.
And Ms. Denham, what is your relationship to Sean?
I'm his grandmother.
And tell the court what you know about his upbringing and his character.
Okay. I've known him for 18 years, 6 months and 14 days. Throughout our relationship, I've had opportunity to observe his character, conduct, and integrity. And I sincerely believe that he is a well-rounded, responsible young man deserving of all your fair consideration. First and foremost, I would like to highlight Sean's exceptional work ethic. From a young age, he has shown an unyielding commitment to his studies, consistency, striving for academic excellence, whether it be maintaining a superior GPA, receiving several college scholarships, which afforded him a full ride, and actively participating in extracurricular activities such as football, baseball, student council, and additional activities since elementary school. He has consistently demonstrated his dedication, discipline, and perseverance. He's also been highlighted on WSB TV's High Five Scores. Moreover, even after Sean had to deal with finding his dad deceased at home 24 days after his 17th birthday, Sean has always exhibited strong integrity and empathy toward others. He consistently extends a helping hand to those in need, especially his family, and as a loyal friend. He demonstrates his compassion and willingness to impact his community positively. The day Sean had to turn himself in as a protector of his older brother, who was born with a disability, and his younger brother, as always, he encouraged his older brother, who would have been his college roommate on August the 8th, and told him to go to college and knock it out the park. And to his younger brother, he told him to stay out of trouble, stay focused on good grades so he can get that money for college. He calls me honey and frequently tells me, "I've got you, honey," and he's got me. Whether volunteering or participating as a 100 Black Men member or engaging in community service projects, he embodies a strong sense of duty and commitment to giving back and showing care for others. Additionally, I have enjoyed witnessing my grandson, Sean Belair, develop excellent interpersonal skills and communication abilities. He has a natural knack for engaging in meaningful conversation, actively listening to others, and expressing his thoughts clearly and respectfully. This ability to connect with others on an emotional and intellectual level has made him a trusted confidant and friend to many. I would like to emphasize that Sean Belair has never been suspended from school and has always acted as a responsible and law-abiding individual. His sincerity and honesty are the foundation of his character. And I have seen him make conscientious choices, even when faced with difficult situations. He understands the importance of accountability and has consistently committed to upholding ethical values. Also, as a descendant of Louise Watson and Atlanta Public School Teacher of the Year, a member of American Federation of Teachers, a teacher who worked in lower income areas of Atlanta and gave her time and money to those children, even making purchases from Neiman Marcus for some, and an active fighter for integration of the Atlanta public school system. Lastly, I'm sorry. Sean Belair exhibits many characters of his great grandmother. Almost there. Lastly, Sean Belair is a young man of incredible character, integrity, and compassion. I have witnessed firsthand his growth, development, and commitment to personal academic success. I earnestly request that you consider these qualities and his positive contributions when deciding. Should you require any additional information or wish to discuss this further, please do not hesitate to contact me with any information I can provide. Thank you for your attention and allowing me to serve as a character witness for my grandson. I also like to finally add that sometimes in life, there are obstacles to prepare us for greatness that God has in store for us. Sean, stay strong, keep your eye on the progress.
Thank you so much, Ms. Denham.
Thank you, Ms. Denham.
Your Honor, we call Melvina Hadley.
Good morning, Ms. Hadley.
Good morning.
Thank you for being here.
And Ms. Hadley, how do you know Sean?
I'm Sean's other grandparent.
Okay, and tell the court what you know about his character as he was growing up to today.
Sean, from the time we brought him home from the hospital, has been one of the best children you can ever ask to have as a grandchild. Sean exhibits outstanding character as an individual of his school, his home, as well as his community. I'm not going to repeat all of the accomplishments that Sean has gone through and has received. I will not repeat all of that, but just to sum it up, I've known this child from birth. This is a child that has always been committed to doing the right thing. He has always looked after his parents. Even me, he'll call and check on me to say, how am I doing? This young man exhibits what every parent would want in a child: dedication, loyalty, academic success. And as you've heard already, all the Office of Scholarships, this young man has spent 18 years and has never been in trouble, has always been on the honors program. I cannot tell you the amount of time that I have been invited to school to witness his accomplishments. And yes, Your Honor, this young man would benefit from your consideration of granting him a bond. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hadley.
Your Honor, we call Carolyn Hill.
How many folks are we calling?
It's a total of 9.
So if they're going to say he's a good guy, I've now heard real clearly from folks particularly close to him. And if we're moving further away from that close orbit.
I'll just call one more then.
Okay.
And Coach.
Ms. Hill, I'm not cutting you off. I also want to, I get it that there are a whole lot of folks who are very, very impressed with everything Mr. Bilal has done in his short 18 and a half years. And so I just want to make sure we get through what we need to get through. So for all of you who are here on his behalf, I appreciate it. It distinguishes Mr. Bilal from many of the young men that I meet in these unfortunate circumstances where there's not family and community support. So it's meaningful that you are all here, even if Mr. Patterson had lined you up to talk and now you're not going to talk. I recognize that you're all here. Coach.
And tell the court your full name.
Okay, I'm Darren Miles, the head football coach at Carver High School here in Atlanta.
Can you spell first and last?
PARRENMYLES.
All right, Coach Miles.
I met Sean 4 years ago, came in as a freshman. Eager to learn. We've always had a tradition of excellence in our programs, especially amongst running backs, which is the position that he's played. And he patiently waited his turn. He didn't get a chance to really become a starter until his senior year. So what that shows to us is commitment, his resilience, attention to detail, and work ethic. When he finally got his opportunity, which was last season, he had, despite his diminutive size, led the region in rushing. Okay, and for those that follow us, he played an extremely tough region. But
Get back up.
but I was around the school through cafeteria duty, morning duty, after school duty, never had any incidents, never been called to the office about anything that he's ever done, you know, whether it's disrespecting a young lady, that's never happened. Always the first in meetings, willing to help the young freshmen that came up, and just high character as can be. And I'm hoping that with all the testimonies that you're giving, that he's given an opportunity to, you know, learn from this mistake and, you know, whatever else that we can do to make that happen.
Thank you. Your Honor, those are all our witnesses. The state may present something. If not, I just have argument.
Okay. Well, why don't you tell me what you think, and then I'll hear from Mr. Abate.
Sure. Your Honor, as the court is aware, you've heard testimony from a young man who's never been in trouble. And the court is aware that the purpose of bond is not to punish an individual, but it's just simply to ensure that he actually comes back to court. And based upon what you heard, Your Honor, it is no doubt that he's not a risk to commit a crime while out on bond. The way you determine whether somebody is a risk to commit a crime while they're out on bond is whether they've committed a crime in the past. There is no crime in my client's past history. Your Honor, also, there's no evidence that he would intimidate any witnesses, obstruct justice, and clearly with the family support and friends that he would never flee the jurisdiction. Your Honor, we, as the court is aware, Georgia favors release on bond prior to trial. It is important, Your Honor, that based upon what we heard about Mr. Bilal, is that he is a perfect candidate for bond. And I suggest, Your Honor, that based upon the seriousness of the charges, and remember, Your Honor, in terms of bond, no matter what the facts are, what the real issue is that whether he qualifies under the Ayala factors. And Your Honor, we believe that we've met the Ayala factors. And Your Honor, we would recommend these type of conditions if the court decided to grant a bond. We certainly believe that he should have a curfew. We believe that he should have either an ankle monitor or a wrist monitor, because with technology, there are now wrist monitors as well that does the same thing as ankle monitors. We believe, Your Honor, that although he is a star athlete and has a scholarship to Albany State University, due to the seriousness of this charge, I can't ask the court to allow him to go down to Albany. We believe that he should be in the Atlanta area while he's out on bond, if the court grants a bond. We also believe, Your Honor, that he should not possess any weapons of any type while out on bond. Even though he's never used drugs, we still believe the bond should say no drugs and alcohol while he's out on bond. And I don't want to insult the court's intelligence as to the amount of bond that I think the court should grant. These are very serious charges. Although we believe it's truly self-defense based upon the video, we believe a $75,000 bond total would be sufficient to ensure, even though we know that he'll be coming to court, but I just want to make sure the court recognize that this is a serious case, so the bond should be reflective of that. And Your Honor, based upon that, we would ask the court to grant a bond with those conditions and any other conditions that the court may see fit.
A couple questions. If I set a bond and your client can make it and will stay local, will he be able to enroll in any college that's local, or would the notion be to hold off on Albany State until this case is resolved? Because what I sometimes do is set a condition of release that is you're either working or you're in school. There's a curfew, but the curfew works around either a job or going to school. I certainly don't want to dictate his educational pursuits, so I wasn't sure if you had spoken with the family that there's a plan B.
Would he be able to go to school here in Atlanta if the judge grants him a bond?
So I am,
Stand, please.
Hello, Ms. Hill.
I am the program director for Five Star Scholarship Foundation, who he has a scholarship from. At this time, the scholarship is on hold. We are not sure if he will be able to take online classes in Albany, but at this time, he currently is an expected freshman. So there is an opportunity that he could do those classes online if local.
Okay, I want to be clear, I'm not making that a condition. The condition would be you're working or you're in school. I was just curious if local school was an option, because some of the school names you listed are great schools, but they would involve Mr. Bilal not being close enough to Fulton County.
He will be able to do it online. Fulton is advised they're putting it on hold until we figure what's going on. So although he's in Atlanta, he still can do classes online.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Bilal. Second question, Mr. Bilal looks like he's in kind of bad shape. Is that something that happened during the Favors Brown encounter, or is that something that's happened since he's been in jail? And am I going to hear, because you said your client's never ever been in trouble, am I going to hear from Mr. Abate that he's been getting in lots of fights in the jail?
Not at all. He was attacked in his sleep and stabbed in the eye. He was literally asleep.
So this was an assault of which he was the victim while in custody?
That is correct.
Okay. All right. Mr. Abate. Share with me what you want to share. I am particularly interested in, I just looked at the commitment paperwork, the nature of the firearm that Mr. Bilal had allegedly, according to the warrants.
Yes, Judge. Good morning.
Good morning.
The state would respectfully request you deny defense counsel's motion for bond for several reasons. I have no reason to dispute Mr. Patterson's recitation as to his client's ties to this community. And based on the number of people who have spoken to the court today, I don't believe that that is an issue. But what I would submit to the court is that the defendant is a significant threat or danger to the community and the people in it, based on the facts and circumstances from this case that occurred on June 20th of this year, Your Honor. This defendant opened fired in a breezeway of an apartment complex here in Atlanta, off of McDaniel Street, in middle of the afternoon, 5:00 p.m., shooting more than 15 rounds with a firearm that had been modified with a switch, which is in itself illegal, shooting at Mr. Favors and Mr. Brown. The person who ambushed the two victims in this case would be the defendant, not the other way around. The video surveillance footage, me and Mr. Patterson seem to have a pretty different view that we're looking at, because the ambush was from the defendant, Your Honor.
So just so I followed almost all of that. Mr. Patterson went through in fairly good detail about cement and these, maybe it was handrails that Mr. Bilal was allegedly leaning against, so that if I had the Favors perspective, I could see Mr. Bilal's back Mr. Bilal couldn't see me. As I creep up, I turn the corner. I Favors open fire, killing Brown. And in defense of Brown and self, Bilal opens fire and kills Favors. That you're saying, no, Brown and Favors are minding their own business, and Bilal comes upon them with this modified illegal handgun and unloads 15 rounds, killing Favors and Brown.
Correct. Mr. Favors was shot a total of.
Hold on, Mr. Patterson, it's not your turn. You'll get the final word. You're the movement.
Mr. Favors was shot a total of 12 times, based on the reports that I've read and speaking with the detective. And I actually sat down with the detective yesterday after court in here, Detective Deegan, and he walked me through the video and pointed out the players and the parties. Based on speaking with Mr. Sprinkle, who did the prelim, and speaking with the detective, sitting down with him yesterday, it's clear the person who was ambushing anyone was the defendant, Mr. Brown and Mr. Favors.
How do you connect this allegedly illegally modified firearm to Mr. Bilal rather than Favors or Brown? Mr. Patterson talked about people leaning over bodies and taking guns, et cetera. How does the gun for which Mr. Bilal is currently charged as an arrest warrant, how is that linked to him?
Several ways, Your Honor. What I would first indicate to the court is that the ballistics were collected from the scene. In the preliminary view of the ballistics by the APD crime lab shows that they were fired from one firearm, which would make it true or seem as if the only person that had a gun, which is what the physical evidence shows, would be the defendant. Secondly, Your Honor, after the shooting, Mr. Bilal gets on not only his Instagram, but takes over his, sounds like his older brother's Instagram, and begins to message and Instagram people. Due to the work of the detective, he was able to get a search warrant and get returns of both Mr. Favors and Mr. Bilal and his brother's Instagram. On that Instagram, the defendant is messaging his friend, asking him to go get the gun, the switch, I think is what he says specifically, from Mac Daddy Mike's house, who is Mike Henley, who lives in the apartment complex where the shooting occurred and where the defendant fled and was found by the police later that day, minutes later.
So this isn't an arrest that occurred 3 weeks later and there's a search warrant executed and there's a gun and maybe it's connected. Mr. Bilal was taken into custody on June 20th.
No, so he actually was not taken into custody. He turned himself in several days later. I think it was June 29th. The reason for that, Your Honor, is he was taken to Grady Hospital because he had received what the state would say are ricochet fires from his own gun that struck him, and he was released from Grady a couple hours after he was admitted. He had agreed to make a statement to Detective Deegan on that day. At the day the appointment arose, he didn't show up for that appointment. He then,
Mr. Patterson, you'll get a chance, and this is a bond hearing that might not come in at trial, but it comes in a bond hearing.
And what I was about to finish that statement is he must have hired Mr. Patterson, who then called Detective Deegan and set up to have an appointment a few days later. Mr. Patterson, the defendant, and his family showed up to APD headquarters as they agreed that they would do. And when they arrived, they said they weren't going to be making a statement. Later, a day or two later, is when warrants were taken and he was contacted and he turned himself in, not hiding that from the court, not saying that he chose not to make a statement. And there's anything bad about that. He exercised his constitutional right. What I would submit to the court is that the defendant is a significant risk of intimidating witnesses, as well as the obstruction of the administration of justice, as it's clear through the Instagram messaging, he's trying to destroy and conceal and hide the evidence of this crime. There is also a ring video where you can hear all of the audio. What you hear in the audio is 15 consecutive fires from a gun like the defendant had on that day with the switch. He is seen days before in a TikTok video with the exact same firearm with a switch. So it's clear that the individual who had the firearm with the switch was the defendant. It's also clear based on the preliminary view of the ballistics evidence is that the physical evidence matches what was found on scene, which is Mr. Favors and Mr. Brown were not armed. This was a shooting because the defendant had a dispute with Mr. Favors over the last couple of weeks about an alleged stolen gun. They were having a disagreement about a gun. And on this day, the defendant decided that he was going to confront Mr. Favors by shooting him 12 times and then Mr. Brown twice, Your Honor. So based upon all of that, I would respectfully request that bond be denied at this time, and the state can assure the court that he will be indicted within the required 90 days.
Do you agree with Mr. Patterson that apart from this arrest, Mr. Bilal has no adult criminal history?
That is correct. He started big, Your Honor, with these crimes.
Okay, thank you.
There is a victim impact statement from Mr. Favors' mother, Ms. Chiquita Favors, when Your Honor deems appropriate.
No, now's the time. In the same way that I heard from witnesses on behalf of Mr. Bilal, now is the time to hear from anyone connected with Mr. Favors or Mr. Brown. Good morning, ma'am. Can you give me your name and spell it so we get it right in the record, please? All right, and you are Mr. Favors' mother? Okay, I appreciate you being here. What do you want to tell me? You probably want to tell me a lot. What we're talking about right now is whether Mr. Bilal should be considered for bond, bail, pending resolution of his charges. And so if you've got a perspective on that, it's important that I hear it.
Well, to be honest, I don't think he deserved a bond for shooting my child. My child's only 15 years old. If this is his first crime, he wouldn't be, and I don't think he deserved a bond. It's your first time being arrested and you got murdered. More than one murder charge, he doesn't deserve a bond. I'm so lost for words, I really don't know what to say. I'm so hurt and broken, angry, like.
Sure, it's all very, very recent. Your son was 15 at the time. Was he a student at Carver also? Maynard Jackson? Okay. Anything else you want to share with me?
Yes, Your Honor, and also, the other young man, I think it's Mr. Brown.
Mr. Brown.
His and Mario was friends, so Mario would never have really secure.
Mario is your son.
Yes.
Got it. Okay. Thank you, ma'am. You got anyone you need to chat with back there?
Nothing further from the state, Your Honor.
Okay. Mr. Patterson, as promised, you're the movement. You get the last word that you were going to pop for a minute there.
Yeah,
I want you to share with me what you want to share, but I assume you're going to focus on this. You've watched the video. Mr. Bate's watched the video. I haven't. I think I'm going to. But help me reconcile.
Absolutely. Your Honor, first of all, I am confident that the state does not have a crime lab that says all of those shells came from the same gun.
I didn't hear him say that because, of course, we all know well that the GBI will get around to this 2024.
Yes.
It was a preliminary analysis from APD, which now has its own experts who do some of the ballistic work.
Yes.
So that's how I heard it.
But we're certain that all of those 20-something rounds will show that was not fired from the same weapon.
Okay.
Also, Your Honor, the state at the preliminary hearing, the officer speculated that my client, while pulling out his weapon, shot him own self and then accidentally shot Mr. Brown. That is absolutely not the case, Your Honor. Mr. Brown was killed by Mr. Favors. And last but not least, Your Honor, at the preliminary hearing, the officer was asked, since so many rounds, and there was also 3 different types of 9mm shells. The officer was asked, did you do a ballistics hand test on both of the deceased? His answer was no.
When you say, meaning the gunshot residue?
Gunshot residue.
Okay.
And to me, Your Honor, as a trained detective, that would be the first thing you do if you see that many shell cases with different models of 9mm shells. So, Your Honor, we believe that my client clearly would be entitled to a bond based upon the conditions that we previously talked about.
Okay.
Thank you.
Give me 1 second. I have one other question, Mr. Patterson. And I know that this is very early in the process and you have very little information from the state. And that's not because the state's violated any obligation. It's just information hasn't started flowing yet. But Mr. Abate referred to some Instagramming that your client may have been doing, suggesting a dispute about a gun or anything like that. Is that anything you want to address at this point, or that's something that's news to you and you would want to see it before you engage on that?
Your Honor, I don't have any information from the state on that, so I really can't comment on that. But we do know that the video speaks for itself, and it simply shows Mr. Favors ambushing my client.
Okay.
I don't know, I can't say what video that the state watched, but I clearly watched the one where he's minding his own business and Mr. Favor walks around and boom.
Okay. All right. Mr. Bilal, you have an impressive background and you've got a number of folks who have some great things to say about you. I'm struggling a little bit to reconcile that with you and the gun and the shooting. They don't align real well. But what I need to do is watch this video footage. It seems to be pretty central. It may be after I see it that I decide that really what ought to happen soon is you have an immunity hearing where a judge would determine whether what you did was clearly enough in self-defense that you ought not to be prosecuted, or instead the judge says there is some doubt about whether it was self-defense, and a jury needs to decide that. Before me is solely the question of bond, and I'm going to ask Mr. Abate to get to me a copy of the video, get the same thing you're sharing with me to Mr. Patterson, so we know we're all looking at the same thing. I suspect there's only one video, but just so we're extra clear, whatever it is you make available to me, let's make sure Mr. Patterson has that as well. I will review it. If I have questions about it, there'll be questions that go to both lawyers. Because of course I only now know a little bit what Mr. Bilal looks like, but he's blocked by a monitor and he's got a Band-Aid on his head, et cetera. So I don't want to be misidentifying folks. And I've seen plenty of videos where there are three fuzzy objects that are three different people. And it may be that the video doesn't show, in my mind, what either of you is saying, and I'll need to work through that. But I think before I can make a sufficiently informed decision about bond, I need to watch the video. And I want to be clear, my decision will be driven not by the risk of flight factor. I think you've demonstrated for me sufficiently, Mr. Patterson, that Mr. Bilal, with the right conditions, is not a risk of flight because of this support group. He wouldn't want to let them down and they would hold him accountable. I heard a lot about how Mr. Bilal is about accountability. I'm actually more focused on this group, keeping Mr. Bilal accountable for showing up for court if he is out on bond. My concern is more safety of the community, and that's why I need to watch that video. The community deserves to be safe from a self-defense perspective. That's how you're framing it. The community deserves to be safe from someone with a gun with a switch on it that's an illegal gun jumping on someone else, and that's how the state has framed it. So I'll watch the video once I get it, and we don't need to reconvene. I can enter my bond order, whether it's denied or setting a bond, and we'll handle it that way. It sounds like the state is moving to indict it fairly expeditiously, which is good because you'll really need to get it assigned to a judge before you can get that immunity motion in front of a judge. But it sounds like that you'll make the strategy decisions for the defense, but based on your presentation to me, it sounds like that's where you'll be headed next. Is there anything else you want me to cover at this time?
Yes, as the court is aware, the government always says we're going to indict somebody short. I would like to ask the court not to make a decision based upon the fact that he's asserted that.
No. That's not in referring to that one. Mr. Abate is not just any lawyer. I work with him regularly. But two, it's encouraging to hear that, but you're exactly right. What would change is that at day 91, I would have to set a bond if my decision after reviewing the video was, I don't think bond is appropriate. So that's my only point. And as I explained to you and your client when he first came out, the case remains with me until it's indicted. So if I review the video and conclude that bond isn't appropriate and we get to day 91, all you need to do is send an email saying, Judge, it's day 91. We don't have to have another hearing. Your client is entitled to a bond at that point, if it's not already indicted. But that's not influencing my decision-making. If bond is appropriate, bond is appropriate. If he makes it, he makes it. It's up to the state to move its indictment process along, however it might. Okay. Mr. Abate, anything else on behalf of the state?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. Thank you both. I'll look for that video as soon as you can get it. I don't know if it's something where it has to be on a thumb drive or it's a link. Just make sure you've confirmed that Mr. Patterson has the same thing.
Yes, Judge, I should have it to you before the end of the day.
Thank you.